A Shalom Akim, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another Quake and Lord's Will, as always, an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, it's just going to be a bit of an exhortation. This is something I was just meditating on in regards to something the Apostle Paul mentioned, in regards to, he that is unmarried, and understanding and recognizing there's a lot of benefits when you remain essentially unmarried without a woman, because sometimes, as young men, we're so, full of zeal and, essentially, understanding, our identity and understanding our heritage and understanding the importance of having multiple women. Sometimes that is not always the most beneficial route to take, for some brothers, right? For some of us, even myself included, for some of us it might be a lot more detrimental, for essentially our development, because sometimes there are things, that we probably would need to address, when not having them, around us. And it would make us a lot more, profitable to, A, to address those things, B, to actually address those things and then share that information with the body, whether it might be a problem, whether it might have been a situation you had with family, and you can use that information for essentially, as the scriptures say, for the edification, of the saints, right? Because it's so, because coming out of the world, we deal with a lot of bad habits and deal with a lot of BS, right? So as the scriptures say, also we mortify the members and, do certain things that's actually going to be more profitable, for the spirit, right? Yes, I'm not ignoring that zeal, but the point really is, it's just to recognize there is a benefit, for brothers, not to think of yourselves, A, less of a person if you don't have one, and B, not to essentially destroy yourself, as the scriptures say. As a matter of fact, let me get that first, because, it's really, you feel more, whole by working more on those things and essentially, getting closer to Yahweh Ba'ashem Shai when you don't have one, right? This is Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 16, and it says, "Be not righteous over much, neither make thyself over wise. Why shouldest thou destroy thyself? Be not over much wicked, neither be thou foolish. Why shouldest thou die before thy time?" Right? So, yes, it's a very important thing when you think about rulership in terms of having more than one, understanding that, when you look at the society as a whole, like, the society is really suffering from essentially an over, or I should say a fertility crisis, right? So we understand in terms of a rulership mindset, why, having multiple wives is very, very beneficial, right? Because at least, a woman actually gets, a man, right? But I'm just speaking in terms of, practicality, in the way, a lot of our condition as we're in right now, practically, wise, it's not always wise to do that, right? And it's sometimes, we're seeking, to get a lot of these women all the time and have a lot of these women around us, in terms to essentially to avoid, working on certain things. Because we know, what comes with a woman is really comfort too, sometimes as well. And I'll acknowledge that, right? As a matter of fact, I think the scriptures say that, essentially like a good woman is like a pillar of rest, to roughly paraphrase, right? So, there is a benefit, if she's actually well cultivated to come, to essentially help you, to be a helpmate unto you. But at the same time, this lesson is really just to kind of hone in and more focus on the benefits of, the absence of one, where you can be a lot more profitable for yourself by trimming a lot of those ways, to actually become more cultivated in righteousness, right? And actually using that, experiences, and becoming more essentially more well-rounded, more whole, by drawing closer to Yahweh Bashim El Shai and not having one, right? So um it's something that Apostle Paul said. I really just wanted to get, because what comes with that also is it's a woman, they love, if there's anything they like is a they like attention, right? So I want to just get this here. This is First Corinthians chapter 7, and this is a precept that's been on my mind in regards to this topic. Really, it's verse 32, and it says, "But I would have you." I'll start at verse 31 actually, and it says, "And they that use the world and not abusing it, for the fashion of this world passeth away," right? So you see all these things, come into pass, right? All these different prophecies and so on and so forth, right? And so essentially we're utilizing the time to essentially make supplication, for, our sins, right? Essentially, watching what's going on, and at the same time, essentially, understanding and wanting the Lord and begging the Lord to essentially have mercy upon us, during these times too. This is verse 32, and it says, "But I would have you without carefulness, for he that is unmarried careth for the things that belong to the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married careth for the things that are of the world, how he may please his wife," right? So it's a very interesting situation. And when you don't have one, you care, you care a lot more for actually trying to please the Lord, trying to make yourself more profitable, utilizing your gift, what I'm saying? So and Paul, and that's another thing too, actually Paul actually goes into that, the different diversity of different gifts, where it could be like interpretation of tongues, or administration. Some brothers are good with prayers. Like for myself, I'm really I like a lot of nutrition, and how understanding the nutrition is essentially how it's supposed to be, as opposed to the defiled foods that we eat. So you get an understanding of how righteousness and how things are really supposed to flourish under a king that is profitable, right? And in the kingdom is going to be an environment that's going to be profitable, because it's actually things are going to be properly adhering to the law, statutes, and commandments. You know what I'm saying? And it wouldn't have war anymore, right? Pursuant to Isaiah, the 2nd chapter. But it just shows, and then when you think about on the contrast, you talk to a lot of men, especially a lot of our men in the world, they make a lot of them, when you think about it, they actually make Adam's mistake without knowing Adam's mistake, right? And when I say that, I mean that they also eat of those different philosophies. They also eat of those different fruits, those different works that are essentially displeasing of the Lord, right? So they may not have known Adam's transgression, but a lot of them are making that transgression because they don't know Adam's story. They don't know what Adam essentially did, right? So that's why when you don't have one and you have this understanding, like, oh man, this is what a lot, because when you really think about it, that's really one of the reasons a lot of these a lot of our men, they get seduced into these different holidays, and especially if they have children and so on and so forth with a woman, they get really entangled with participating in all these different holidays and Halloween and Christmas, because a woman wants to do it. It was the same thing in the time of the when you read about in the book of Jeremiah. You had Israelites, they were essentially they were baking cakes for the Queen of Heaven, right? And that was a tradition back then, but how much more the traditions that exist today, these pagan traditions that exist today, right? So their mindset is essentially how to please a wife. So it's becoming a lot more about woman worship rather than actually, pleasing the Lord, basically, right? So this is really just an exhortation, and on recognizing the benefits of, when you don't have one. It's, not to, you can use it as an opportunity to make yourself, more whole, right? Use it as an opportunity to actually, essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Get closer to the Lord, right? You can, address certain things about yourself, because a lot of us have a lot of bad habits. Like I was saying, I'll use myself as an example, and this is not trying to boast, but like I used to have a lot of, ongoing issues, with my father and so on and so forth, right? But sometimes you're in a situation where you're able to resolve a lot of those things, but sometimes we're not always in a situation, that you may not be on peaceable terms, but it might be on peaceable terms, right? But the point is to address the, utilizing the alone time to, be able to address certain things and become a lot more profitable. This is Sirach chapter 37 verse 27. It says, "My son, prove thy soul and thy life, and see what is evil for it, and give not that unto it. For all things are not profitable for all men, neither hath every soul pleasure in everything." So not everything, we have a lot of tendencies and habits that we picked up, essentially, that may not be profitable for you. And essentially shifting that energy, to use that that time, that alone time, to essentially use it to be more essentially spiritually profitable, right? So I'm kind of running around, here and there. This is one of my this one in chapter 8 is one of my favorite chapters. This is Wisdom of Solomon. Just to show and, really recognize and understand the benefits of wisdom, and understanding also that wisdom, it also is a, you could look at it as also protection as well, because when you really, think about it, sometimes the Lord can also be protecting you from a lot of these, garbage, demonic women, that are essentially a bunch of Jezebels, so to speak. And a lot of women out there are like Susanna and Judith and Abigail and Hannah. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of those are women are not like that, right? So, you can, it's so beneficial to, have that alone time is very beneficial, right? And it's in this society where, it's all about comfort. It really is very looked down upon, right? So I just wanted to, read this just in regards to the understanding the profitability, of wisdom, right? This is Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 10, and it says, "And I loved her above health and beauty, and I chose to have her instead of light. For the light that cometh from her never goeth out. For all good things together came to me with her, and innumerable riches in her hands, and rejoiced in them all, because wisdom goeth before them. And I knew not that she was the mother of them. I learned to diligently and communicate her liberally, and I do not hide her riches," right? So what makes a man more decked out, as they say in the world, what makes a man more, looking, very, very essentially decked out. Decked out is the best word I can think of. Is really is wisdom, right? And what wisdom really is, it really starts with, having a fear of the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? Wisdom really and truly is really the principal thing, right? And you can see that too when you look at a lot of our people, especially a lot of our people in the world, celebrities, so on and so forth. Even if they have a lot of these women and access, around them, it shows you that they don't have any wisdom. It shows you in their countenance, because they're dead. Essentially, a lot of them still make the same. A lot of our men, they make the mistakes Adam did, right? Continuing on. Where was I? I'll jump to verse 17, and it says, "For he hath given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely, to know how the world was made, and the operation of the elements, the beginning, ending, midst of the times, alteration of the turning of the sun, and the change of seasons, and the circuits of the years, and the positions of stars, and the nature of living creatures, and the furies of wild beasts, and the violence of winds, the reasonings of men, the diversities of plants, and the virtues of roots. And all things are either secret or manifest, them I know." So all we, that's a lot of wisdom, that's a lot of information, because that's understanding of how to actually govern the different, understanding there's order to a lot of these things that are upon the planet Earth, right? So it's mentioning the different, living creatures and wild beasts, wisdom, when you really think of it, and it might seem like a simple thing, is knowing that, okay, I do not eat this pig, I do not eat this catfish, because what does that do? It is also understanding, not only is it displeasing towards the Lord, it's also knowing that this catfish or this pig, I'm just using those two as an example, is also understanding that these two animals in the sea or the land, they fulfill a particular purpose upon the planet. They have to do and clean up garbage. They're a garbage cleanup crew. That's having wisdom, right? But this world, is not a place that actually has wisdom, right? So you understand of how the world is actually supposed to be governed and governed properly, right? So that's pretty much it. I kind of just wanted to just do a quick lesson, in regards to somebody who is, he that is unmarried, right? And not to essentially, as a matter of fact, I want to read this story real quick, because I think this is a very interesting story, and you could, just take and pull, like the way I'll just read it. I'll just read it. This is Mark chapter 5, verse 25, and it says, "And a certain woman had an issue of blood 12 years, and suffered many things of many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was nothing bettered, but grew worse. When she had heard of Yahushua, came in and pressed behind, and touched his garment. For she said, If I may touch his clothes, I shall be whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body was healed of that plague. And Yahushua, immediately knowing in herself the virtue had gone out of him, turned him about in the press and said, Who touched my clothes? Yahushua said. And it says, And the disciples said unto him, Thou seest a multitude thronging thee. Sayest thou, Who touched me? Right? So you see a lot of people, moving back and forth, and I'm guessing they're in a big crowd, right? So it's I don't know who touched you. You know what I'm saying? And it says, And he looked round about, seeing her that had done this thing, and the woman fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, and came and fell down before him, and touched it, and told him all the truth, and said to her, Daughter, thy faith had made thee whole. Go in peace, and be whole of this plague. And I'm reading this, because this woman actually recognized and understood the fact that, she was sick, right? Just like a lot of us have all these different, infirmities, not just in a physical sense, but a lot of it is trauma that we deal with, coming out from the world, whether it's from our mothers, or it could have been from a father. He probably was there, but he just didn't, he wasn't present to actually give you proper guidance and whatever, right? Like all these different BS that we come from, come out of the world from, right? And understanding Yahushai. And this might sound really crazy to say this, but sometimes I feel like all those things that we went through, were all necessary evils, because it forces us to be like that woman to touch Yahushai's clothes, right? Like, because we understand that the Lord comes in the volume of the book, and we get healing, from trying to grab onto his garment in a spiritual sense, if that makes sense, right? Understanding that we're trying to grab on closer to him, because he's the physician, and Yahushua said, "They that are whole don't need a physician, but they that are sick," right? So, I just wanted to read that real quick, and just to exhort, and understand that it's not a loss when you don't have one, right? You can look at it also as an opportunity as well, for healing. Look at it as an opportunity, and an opportunity for healing, and an opportunity to be more profitable. Recognize that you have gifts. You know what I'm saying? So look at it as an opportunity rather than as a loss, so to speak, right? So, I sincerely pray, this lesson was just quick and edifying. Just wanted to, share some comfort and exhort brothers, and, keep your spirits alive if you don't have one, right? Because we see as times, going on right now, we're seeing a lot of these women are essentially, a lot of them are looking for husbands, right? But, anyways, I just thought I would, discuss that real quick. But Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.